Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a subject that, well, frankly, it terrifies me a little bit.
Oh, really? What are we getting into?
It's about that sinking feeling. You walk into a room, maybe it's a high-stakes negotiation or a pitch meeting, or even just a dinner party with people you want to impress, and you just feel like you're disappearing. Like you're saying the words, the logic is sound, but the message is just dying in the air.
The invisible man syndrome. Yeah, it's incredibly common. And usually when that happens, our first instinct is to blame the script.
Totally.
We go home, we replay the tape in our heads, and we obsess over the syntax. We think, oh, if I had just chosen a better adjective, or if I'd memorized that third statistic, then I would have won the room.
Exactly. We treat communication like it's some kind of vocabulary test. If I get an A on the vocabulary, I win the interaction. But the research we're looking at today, and we have massive stack of sources here on the psychology of influence, it just completely dismantles that whole idea.
It does.
It introduces something called the 90-10 rule. And honestly, reading through this, it's a bit of a brutal reality check, especially for anyone who prides themselves on being smart.
It is, but it's also the key, I think, to unlocking why you aren't getting the results you want. The premise of the 90-10 rule is, well, it's stark. The words that actually come out of your mouth,
The content.
the semantic content, the data, the arguments you've prepared, they represent less than 10% of your actual influence.
Less than 10%. That seems dangerously low.
It's tiny.
So you're telling me that 90% of whether people listen to me or respect me or agree with me has nothing to do with what I'm actually saying?
Yeah.
That sounds like we're saying logic doesn't matter.
Not that it doesn't matter, but that logic is the caboose, not the engine.
Okay.
The other 90% is all psychology, it's strategy, it's understanding how the human brain processes threats and status. It's your presence, your timing, your silence. It's the thousands of subconscious signals you're sending before you even finish a sentence. It's the difference between being correct and being persuasive.
This explains a scenario that drives me absolutely crazy. I see it all the time. You've got the person who is objectively the smartest in the room, highest IQ, did all the research, knows the data cold.
The subject matter expert.
Right. But when they speak, people check their phones.
Yeah.
Then you have someone else, maybe not the genius of the group, maybe they didn't even do the reading.
Yeah.
But when they speak, everyone leans in, they get the promotion, they get the funding.
And we usually just chalk that up to luck or natural charisma, don't we?
Of course, they were just born with it.
Right. They have the X factor. It's a way for us to excuse our own lack of influence. But the source material we're diving into argues that natural charisma is largely a myth. Communication mastery isn't a talent you're born with. It's a skill, a mechanic. It's like a surgeon learning anatomy. You can actually manufacture charisma if you understand the neuroscience behind it.
And that is the mission for today. We're going to unpack the psychology of powerful communication. We're moving way beyond speak clearly and smile. We are getting into the neuroscience of influence, the weaponization of silence, which I found just fascinating.
It's a game changer.
And how to stop sabotaging yourself. Because looking at the data here, it seems like most of us are shooting ourselves in the foot before we even open our mouths.
The data suggests something like 95% of people are making these fatal communication errors. Errors that signal weakness, insecurity, and, low status almost immediately.
95%. That's an epidemic. So let's start there. This first section is called the sabotage. What are these fatal mistakes we're making without even realizing it?
Okay, so the first one is called reactive communication. This is a huge status killer. It's defined as entering an interaction and just waiting for others to set the tone. It's walking into a room and psychologically asking for permission to exist.
Can you give me a concrete example? Because I feel like I might do this.
It usually comes out as an apology loop. It's the person who starts every contribution with, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think maybe, or I'm not sure if this is right.
So does that make sense? At the end of every statement.
That's the line.
Okay, I definitely do that. But isn't that just being polite? I mean, I'm trying not to be overbearing.
You think you're being polite. The primitive brain of the listener thinks you are weak.
Oh.
That's the harsh truth the sources point out. When you preface your ideas with hesitation, you are literally training the other person to view you as a follower. You're handing over your power. The human brain is just wired to respect certainty. And when you start with hesitation, you're telling the other person's brain, this information isn't important, you can filter this out.
So it's a filtering mechanism. I'm basically flagging my own email as spam before I even send it.
Precisely. You're negotiating against yourself. And that leads us directly into the second big mistake, which is the information dump.
The smart person's curse. Okay, let's unpack this because I think a ton of our listeners, who are learners by nature, fall right into this trap. The logic seems sound. I want to persuade you. Therefore, I need to provide all the facts. More data equals more persuasion. Right?
Wrong. In almost every context, more data just equals more resistance. The source material highlights something called cognitive overload theory. And here's the neuroscience. The brain processes emotion first and logic second.
Emotion first.
Always. The logic center, the prefrontal cortex, it's energy expensive and it's slow. So when you dump a truckload of facts and statistics and context on someone right out of the gate, you trigger a physiological shutdown.
You're exhausting them.
You're exhausting them. They stop listening not because you're wrong, but because their brain physically cannot process the load. You're signaling that you don't understand their needs or their attention span. You're making the conversation about you proving you're smart rather than about them understanding the concept.
Oof, that hits home. It's ego masquerading as thoroughness.
Okay.
So what's the third sabotage?
Mirror communication. This is the chameleon effect. It's when you unconsciously copy the energy, the style, or even the opinions of whoever you're talking to.
Wait a second. I've read plenty of business books that say mirroring is a good thing. You know, if they lean back, you lean back. It's supposed to build rapport.
And there is a very, very fine line between rapport and capitulation. Rapport is good. But mirror communication in this context is about losing your unique voice. If you're constantly adjusting your personality to match the room, being loud with loud people, quiet with quiet people, agreeing with everyone,
You become forgettable.
you become forgettable and untrustworthy. People don't trust chameleons because they don't know what the chameleon actually stands for.
That makes so much sense. If I don't know who you really are, I can't trust you with a big decision.
Precisely, which leads to the fourth big mistake. Emotional leakage.
This sounds messy.
It is psychologically messy. It's when your internal state, your anxiety, your desperation, your insecurity, it leaks out through micro signals.
Like what?
Maybe your voice pitch goes up. Maybe you start speaking too fast. Maybe you're fidgeting with your pen or touching your face.
It's like when you're desperate for the sale or desperate for the date, and you think you're playing it cool, but everyone can smell the desperation on you.
Exactly. We are evolved to detect those leaks. And the verdict from the listener's brain is immediate. If this person can't control their own emotions, I cannot trust them with my problems.
Okay, so we've got reactive communication, information dumping, mirroring, and emotional leakage. That is quite the sabotage list. It's a wonder any of us ever get anything done.
Right.
So let's pivot to the solution side. The source material talks about the first 3 seconds.
This is where the neuroscience gets really fascinating. They talk about thin slice judgments.
What exactly is a thin slice judgment?
It's an evolutionary mechanism. Think about it. Back when we were dealing with predators on the savannah, we didn't have time to interview a lion to see if it was friendly. We didn't have time for coffee with a stranger from another tribe to see if they were high status or low status. We had to know instantly, threat or ally, competent or incompetent. The brain still does this. In less than 3 seconds, people decide if you are worth listening to.
3 seconds? I haven't even ordered my coffee yet.
You haven't even said hello, and these snap judgments are incredibly hard to reverse. If I categorize you as low status in second 2, everything you say after that is filtered through that lens.
So you have to win the physical presence game immediately.
Yeah, that too.
So what does that look like? Are we talking about like power posing, walking in like you own the place?
Not exactly the exaggerated hands-on hips thing that can look ridiculous and performative, but it is about taking up space. Confident people occupy appropriate space. They move with purpose. No fidgeting, no rushing. The source describes an aligned posture, spine straight, shoulders back, open chest. It triggers an unconscious association with competence. If you are collapsed, hunched over your phone, making yourself small, you're signaling, I am not a threat, but I'm also not a leader.
It's turtle mode.
Yeah.
You're protecting your vital organs because you feel unsafe.
Exactly. And people pick up on that fear.
Okay, what about the eyes? I feel like eye contact is always so tricky. Too much is creepy, too little is shifty.
The source material actually gives a specific formula, which I love because it removes all the guesswork.
Okay, let's hear it.
It suggests the 3 to 5 second rule. You maintain eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds while you are speaking, and then slightly longer, 4 to 6 seconds while you're listening.
That's a very specific recipe. Why the difference?
Well, when you listen, holding eye contact for a bit longer validates the speaker. It says, I am focused on you.
Right.
But when you speak, if you stare for too long without breaking, it becomes a dominance battle. It triggers the predator alarm in the other person. You want authority, not aggression.
And then there's the voice. We talked about leakage, but what's the specific vocal sabotage we need to avoid in those first few seconds?
Up talk.
Making statements sound like questions.
Exactly. You see how weak that sounds. When you end the declarative statement with an upward inflection, you are literally asking the listener to validate what you just said. You're saying, is this okay that I said this?
It kills your authority.
Instantly. That and speaking too fast, speed signals anxiety. Slowness signals control.
And the primacy effect wraps this all up, right?
Yeah.
The very first words out of your mouth set the tone for everything.
Yes, absolutely. Never open with an apology unless you, actually stepped on someone's foot.
Right.
Don't say sorry to bother you. Open with purpose. I have an update on the project. Direct. Purposeful.
Okay, so we've made a good first impression. We survived the first 3 seconds. Now we need to actually command respect. Which brings us to the authority matrix. And I want to clarify something right away because I think people get this so wrong. Authority is not the same as aggression.
Huge distinction. I would argue they are opposites.
How so?
Aggression signals weakness. Think about the boss who screams or the person who interrupts constantly. If you have to yell, if you have to dominate, if you have to use force, it's because you lack genuine authority. True authority is calm. It's controlled. It's magnetic. It pulls people in. It doesn't push them down.
I love that. Aggression relies on force. Authority relies on magnetism. So how do we build that magnetism? One of the pillars mentioned is intellectual confidence.
This is a nuanced one. It's about knowing what you know, but also, and this is the key part, acknowledging what you don't know.
Okay.
It's totally distinct from arrogance. Arrogance is pretending you know everything, which is fragile because eventually you'll be wrong. Intellectual confidence is saying, I know X and Y for a fact. I'm unsure about Z, but here is how we're going to find out.
That actually segues perfectly into the next point. Strategic vulnerability.
Yeah.
Which seems counterintuitive.
Right.
We think leaders should never show weakness. We feel like we need to be these bulletproof robots. But the text says vulnerability is a power move.
It is, if it is strategic. Admitting a specific mistake or a limitation creates trust. It shows emotional maturity. If you say, look, I got that projection wrong and here's how I'm fixing it, people trust you more, not less. But the caveat is crucial. It must be strategic. It cannot be emotional dumping.
So you're not using your team as your therapist.
Please don't.
Right. I'm struggling with this decision as strategic. I'm so overwhelmed and I want to quit and my cat is sick. Is not.
Exactly. One builds a bond and invites collaboration. The other breaks confidence and creates panic.
What about boundaries? Because a lot of nice people, I think, struggle with authority because they have loose boundaries. We want to be liked, so we let things slide.
And the key phrase here is calm consistency. You enforce your standards without drama. When a boundary is crossed, someone is late, someone is disrespectful, someone drops the ball, you address it matter-of-factly. You don't get angry, you just state the reality. We don't speak to clients that way.
Simple. Done.
Simple. Done. The lack of emotional reaction is what makes it so authoritative. It shows you aren't rattled by their bad behavior, you are just correcting course.
That is powerful. Okay, moving on to one of my favorite sections of this deep dive, the sound of power. We are talking about strategic silence.
This is a big one. Most people are terrified of silence. We call it nervous chatter. There's a pause in the conversation, and we panic. We feel this pressure in our chest to fix the dead air, so we start babbling.
I do this constantly. If there's a 3-second gap, I'm filling it with a bad joke or some random fact. I just want the tension to go away.
And that kills your status. It signals that you are uncomfortable in your own skin. The expert perspective here is that silence isn't the absence of communication. It is a tool for control. The source material gives us a whole toolkit of silences.
Okay, let's go through the toolkit. First up, the confidence pause.
This happens before you speak. Someone asks you a question. Instead of answering immediately, which looks reactive, like a reflex, you take a beat, you pause.
What's that signal?
It signals that your words are valuable and worth waiting for. It shows you are thinking, not just reciting a script.
I like that. It creates anticipation. It forces them to look at you. Okay, then there's the emphasis pause.
This one is used after a bold statement. We are going to change the industry standards. And then you pause. You let it sink in. If you rush to the next sentence, you dilute the power of the first one. You have to give their brain time to catch the weight of it.
And then the scary one, the tension pause.
This is the heavy lifter. You use this in negotiations or when you're addressing bad behavior. Let's say you make an offer or you call someone out on a lie. You state your case, and then you just shut up. You let the discomfort sit in the room.
Oh, that is painful just thinking about it.
It is supposed to be. You want the other person to feel the weight of that silence. Usually, the person with less confidence will rush to break it.
By conceding something.
Often by conceding or over-explaining. If you can sit in the tension longer than they can, you win.
It's a contest of who can handle the awkwardness. And finally, the processing pause.
This is for your own safety. When you get asked a difficult, loaded question, take time to think. It prevents defensive, reactive responses. It's okay to say, let me think about that for a moment, and just sit there. It actually makes you look more thoughtful, not less.
So silence is a weapon. But let's talk about, when we do speak, let's talk about persuasion. The source calls this the persuasion operating system.
And it goes right back to that neuroscience we touched on earlier with the information dump. People decide based on feelings, then they use logic to justify the decision.
So if you try to persuade with logic first, you lose.
You lose. You have to engage the emotion.
The source mentions the give-to-get principle for building rapport. Is this just about, doing favors for people?
It's deeper than that. Real rapport isn't just mimicking body language or buying someone lunch. It's a mindset shift. It's shifting from what can I get from this person to what can I give? Well, when you focus on giving value, attention, insight, help, connections, you trigger a reciprocity loop. But it has to be genuine. People can smell transactionality a mile away.
And what about when people push back? There's this point on addressing resistance proactively. This reminded me of that scene in the movie 8 Mile. Where the rapper disses himself before his opponent can.
It's the stealing thunder technique. Don't ignore the objections. If you know your product is expensive or your idea is risky, you say it first. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is too expensive.
That seems so counterintuitive. Why bring up the negative? Aren't you just highlighting your own flaws?
Because they are already thinking it. By saying it out loud, you prove you understand their perspective. You disarm them. You take the weapon right out of their hands. You move from being a salesman trying to trick them to being a partner in the conversation. You're saying, I see the same problems you do.
And the final principle of persuasion here is make it easy.
Friction kills deals. You can have someone emotionally hooked and logically convinced, but if the next step is complicated, they will stall. You have to remove every single barrier. Do the paperwork for them, outline the exact next step, make saying yes the path of least resistance.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the mechanics, posture, silence, persuasion. Now let's talk about the vibe, the atmosphere. Section 6 covers advanced social calibration and charisma.
Social calibration. It's the difference between being book smart and being socially intelligent. It's the ability to read the unwritten rules of a room.
All right, you don't tell the same jokes at a funeral that you tell at a birthday party. That's the obvious version. But what about in a business context?
It's about situational awareness. Who holds the formal power? Who holds the informal power? We've all been in that meeting where the CEO is technically in charge, but everyone keeps looking at the VP of engineering for approval. If you pitch the CEO and ignore the VP, you fail. You have to map the room and understand the emotional climate.
And then audience analysis. Do they want the big picture vision or do they want the safety details?
Exactly. If you sell vision and revolution to a safety person, someone who manages risk, you will scare them. They don't want a revolution. They want predictability.
And if you sell details and spreadsheets to a vision person, you bore them to death.
You have to speak their language, not yours.
Now, let's get to the fun part. Manufacturing charisma. The text asks, can you really learn charisma? I always thought you have it. It's an aura. You either walk in like George Clooney or you don't.
The source says absolutely yes, you can learn it. It is not magic. It is presence intensity.
Presence intensity? That sounds like a cologne. What is it really?
It's the core technique of making the other person feel like they are the most important person in the room. Think about the classic Bill Clinton example. People always say when you met him, the rest of the world just disappeared.
Right.
And in the modern world, this is actually easier to stand out with because the bar is so low.
Because everyone is just looking at their phone.
Yes. We are in a total deficit of attention. If you put your phone away, ignore distractions, and give someone 100% of your focus, looking at their eyes, listening to their words, that intensity feels like charisma. It feels magnetic because it's so rare.
That's so true. When someone actually listens to you, I mean, really listens, it's intoxicating. You feel seen.
And you combine that with emotional attunement. If they are excited, you match that energy. If they are somber, you match that. You validate their state.
So you don't tell a sad person to cheer up.
No, you meet them where they are. And finally, positive assumption.
This is a mindset thing, right?
It is. It's about interpreting ambiguous behavior generously. If someone is short with you, don't automatically assume they hate you. Assume they're busy. Assume they have a headache. Giving people the benefit of the doubt creates psychological safety. And people love being around other people who make them feel safe and judged positively.
This is all great for normal days. But what happens when the building is on fire? Figuratively or literally? Section 7 deals with high-stakes communication crisis and conflict.
Yeah, the rules change in a crisis. The number one rule is emotional regulation. If the leader panics, everyone panics. The leader acts as the emotional thermostat for the group.
The thermostat versus the thermometer.
Right. A thermometer just reflects the temperature. It's hot in here. A thermostat sets the temperature. You have to process your own emotions internally before you speak. You can be scared. You're human. But you cannot communicate terror. You have to communicate resolve.
And how do we handle the information vacuum? You know, when things go wrong, rumors start flying immediately.
Information management. You have to be transparent even when you don't know everything. The formula is simple. Say what you know, say what you don't know, and say what you were doing to find out.
Give me an example.
We know the server is down. We do not know the cause yet. We have the team investigating and will update you in 30 minutes. That stops the panic. It fills the vacuum with facts so rumors can't get in.
Okay. And then there's conflict, navigating difficult conversations. The source highlights a distinction here that I think could save a lot of marriages and business partnerships. Facts versus interpretations.
This is the source of like 90% of conflict. We fight over interpretations thinking they are facts.
Yeah.
Here's an interpretation. You don't respect deadlines. If I say that to you, how do you feel?
Immediately defensive. I want to fight you. I want to list all the times I did respect deadlines.
Right, because I just attacked your character.
Yeah.
But here is the fact. The project was submitted 2 days late. That is an objective starting point. We can discuss that. We can't discuss my opinion of your inner respect levels without it turning into a fight.
So stick to the observable reality. You left the dishes in the sink versus you are a slob.
Exactly. One is solvable, the other is a war. And then listen for understanding, not rebuttal. Most people are listening just to find the flaw in the other person's argument so they can attack. If you actually listen to understand their constraint, why were the dishes left? You can actually solve the problem.
And the valid point technique.
It's so disarming. Acknowledge where the other person is right. Even if they are 90% wrong, find the 10% where they are right and say it. You make a valid point about the timeline being tight. It creates collaborative momentum. You aren't enemies anymore. You're solving a puzzle together.
We're coming into the home stretch here. We've covered so many techniques: posture, silence, crisis management. But the source material makes a point that I think is critical. Underneath all of this is the confidence algorithm. Because if you don't believe in yourself, these techniques will just seem fake. You'll be a robot doing eye contact.
This is where we have to distinguish between process confidence and outcome confidence. And this is a game changer. You probably see this with athletes all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Outcome confidence is relying on winning. I feel good because I won the last game, but that's so dangerous because you can't always control the win. You can play a perfect game and still lose.
Exactly. So if your confidence is tied to the result, you are fragile. Process-based confidence is trusting your ability to handle the situation regardless of the result. It's, I'm confident not because I know they will say yes, but because I know I can handle it if they say no.
That is unshakable. So how do we build that?
The feedback loop. You have to systematically seek out situations that stretch you, comfort zone expansion. You don't get confident by staying safe. You get confident by surviving the things that scare you.
So go do the things that make your palms sweat.
Yes. And then evidence accumulation. Deliberately remembering your successes. Our brains are like Velcro for failure and Teflon for success.
Oh, true.
We remember that one awkward moment from high school forever, but we forget the great presentation we did last week. You have to force your brain to remember, hey, I handled that tough meeting. I am competent.
And don't forget the physiology. using your breath and posture to hack the mind-body connection. If you breathe like a calm person, your brain starts to believe you are a calm person.
It's a total biohack, and it works. The brain takes cues from the body just as much as the body takes cues from the brain.
Okay, let's try to wrap this all up. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the 3-second rule to strategic silence to crisis management protocols.
It's a lot. And the temptation for the listener right now is to try and do all of it tomorrow. To walk into the office with perfect posture, 4-second eye contact, long pauses, and strategic vulnerability.
Which would be a total disaster. You look like an alien.
It would be completely inauthentic. You'd be making all those mistakes we talked about at the beginning.
So let's talk about the mastery mindset for our outro here. How do we actually implement this without short-circuiting our brains?
Communication is a lifelong study. It requires pattern recognition. So just start observing. Watch people in meetings. Watch how your boss speaks. Watch how the barista reacts to you. Treat the world like your personal lab.
And the implementation plan itself.
Pick one thing, just one. Maybe for the next week, you focus purely on the first 3 seconds. Posture, eye contact, no apologies, ignore everything else. Once that becomes automatic, then move to silence.
So the goal is to move from conscious effort to automatic behavior.
Exactly. You want to reach a point where you don't have to think about making eye contact, you just do it. Because that's who you are now.
I love that. And I want to leave our listeners with this final provocative thought from the source material. It's this idea of the communication revolution. When you apply these tools, you aren't just speaking differently. You are changing the fundamental way the world perceives your value. You actually change your trajectory.
The very next conversation you have, whether it's with your spouse, your boss, or the cashier at the grocery store, that is your testing ground. That is the lab.
So go out there, take a confidence pause, and start leading the room. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.